In our previous lecture, we looked at the accountability and legitimacy of NGOs. In this lecture, we're going to turn our attention to the advocacy strategies. We're going to examine what strategies work and what do not. Moreover, in what situations should NGOs engage in particular types of strategies. It is first worthwhile examining what the term advocacy means. In general, it means organized efforts to effect systemic or incremental change. This sort of definition can therefore cover the activities of any pressure group, whether it's business or government or civil society, that is pushing for change. This might be pushing for reform within a particular organization. It might mean pushing for the interests of a particular group vis-a-vis others. It might mean the practice of politics. In other words, what we can articulate is that advocacy is carried out by an entity that's retained and staffed by professionals, often lawyers, and influence politicians and key government officials. These uses of advocacy, mind you, says very little about the nature or value of the advocacy undertaken. Advocacy in this sense could be, and often is, undertaken to further advantage rich and powerful clients, and could concern a variety of causes ranging from the ethical to the criminal. This use of advocacy is value neutral and does not say anything about the cause that's being advocated or those who will benefit from the advocacy. Now, when we use the term advocacy in the NGO world, we're describing the advocacy work of NGOs. However, we're using it in ways that are importantly different than, say, in the business or in private enterprise or within government. Namely, NGOs are value-based organizations of citizens whose motivation is a desire for a better world for the poor and disadvantaged. So advocacy in this sense is used by NGOs that has two particular specific elements which underlie the way NGOs are doing advocacy. Namely, the advocacy effort must involve citizens in the advocacy process. In general, their involvement should be conscious, intentional, and democratic. The advocacy effort must be directed towards specific and identified disadvantaged groups, or must attempt to redress situations which the citizens as a whole find themselves in. So advocacy is practiced by NGOs, is a systemic, democratic, and organized effort by NGOs to change, influence, or initiate policies, laws, practices, and behavior so that disadvantaged citizens in particular, or all citizens in general, will benefit. To best understand how NGO advocacy can be most effective, we must first understand the NGO Constitution and governance structures. First, the NGO Constitution. An NGO's Constitution is both a clear explanation of what you want to do and how you want to do it, and the document that is usually required for you to have a legal identity, and where necessary, a government registration. The NGO Constitution should simply state what the organization is for, what sorts of things it wants to do, who's going to be responsible for the organization and how they are chosen, what their responsibilities are going to be, how it will be communicated to the public, what will be the NGO's legal identity, and how and under what circumstances can the Constitution be changed. So in many respects, a Constitution is quite fundamental to an NGO. It is worth spending time composing it so that it can be handed out to all interested individuals to prove the bona fides and good intentions of the NGO. NGOs should also be concerned with issues of transparency to make sure that their activities are open and clear. Such transparency is very important with advocacy NGOs because they are likely to be embroiled in conflictual situations and to be targeted for a variety of both responsible and irresponsible criticism. Most constitutions of CSOs provide for the organization to have elected leaders, and for those elected leaders to have fixed terms of office. The thinking behind this is that a healthy advocacy NGO should not become the property of a single individual or a small clique of individuals. It should be open to the new ideas which spring from new individuals and new membership, and should stand the test of democratic choice, whereby the supporters can vote to show whether they are happy with the leadership or not. At the same time, many advocacy NGOs have attracted unique and powerful leaders who can advance the cause of their organizations better than most. Often their leadership is the glue which keeps the organization together, and if they are exchanged with others, it may harm the organization. Such problems often arise because of confusion between the governing, the advisory, and the executive functions of leadership. Powerful and charismatic individuals do not necessarily have to become executive directors of the organization. The basis for an advocacy NGO is people voluntarily coming together who share a common vision of a better world. Decision-making in such an NGO remains in the hands of any of the concerned individuals who decide to attend meetings, and activities are carried out by such individuals on a voluntary basis. It does not take long for such individuals to make themselves into a formal organization and to formalize their interests by becoming members of this organization. In other words, the members are the most fundamental aspect of any organization, whether it's an advocacy NGO or the like. They are the individuals who are prepared to pledge themselves in some way to an organization and its values. There are also the individuals who are prepared formally to set up an organization. An advocacy NGO will be no different. It will have enthusiastic supporters who will at some point want to become formalized members. Often these formal members become the General Assembly of members, which in turn has the authority to elect a board. Any advocacy NGO, however, has to consider how it will handle the question of membership. By its nature, an advocacy NGO can adopt different strategies for its membership, depending on the vision of the founders, the culture of the organization and society at large, and the political reality of the state. The first question to consider is whether you're seeking members in order to fulfill a legal requirement, and there may be some guidelines in legal or government documents which specify, for instance, the number of members at a minimum level to form a General Assembly and set up your organization, or whether you're really actively seeking a large membership to show the strength of citizens' feelings on this topic, in effect a mass membership. A second question to consider is whether you're seeking a limited membership of individuals with particular qualities of status, expertise, influence, or wealth so that they can sustain the organization and give it visibility, credibility, and access. A third question is to consider whether your membership will be a fundraising strategy for the organization, since each member will be required to pay for their membership, or whether membership fees will be nominal. Next lecture, we will look at fundraising in greater depth. A fourth question is to consider whether your membership will be overt or covert. There will be many individuals who support your work, but who are not inclined to publicly link their names with your organization because of its name, because of other individuals associated with it, or simply due to the fact there's concerns about their own public exposure. Such individuals might be very worried about having their name publicly on a membership list. Your NGO may be concerned with sensitive issues and has to be conscious of the feelings of its supporters. A fifth question to consider is whether anyone can be a member of your organization, or whether there is some criteria that needs to be applied. If your membership elects the board, then it may be very important to be sure that your membership is not dominated by a particular sector, like government officials or employees of a particular company. Connected with the question of criteria is to ask yourselves whether it should be a condition that your members are well informed about the particular cause your NGO is addressing, or simply interested in it. Whatever your decision about your strategy for seeking and enrolling members, membership must mean something. The organization, the advocacy NGO, must cherish in one way or another the individuals who have shown that they care about your cause, or the individuals who have shown that they share certain values with your advocacy NGO. There are two very basic advocacy strategies that all NGOs can engage in. First is the mass movement, second is the powerful lobby. Let me say a few words about the mass movement strategy. Here, an advocacy NGO will try to identify other organizations that are sympathetic to what it's doing and form coalitions with them. The members of all these organizations become, in turn, members of a coalition and will form a mass movement that can be shown to express the concerns of the citizens for or against the cause for which the NGO stands. An example might be a coalition of churches, trade unions, chambers of commerce, with the advocacy NGO as a catalyst helping to bring them together and give them direction. The power of the advocacy NGO is thus expressed through the way it has been able to raise people's awareness about an issue. The second basic strategy is the powerful lobby. Here, the advocacy NGO will try to identify individuals who are very well placed in key positions and convince them of the power and right of their arguments. Such few but key individuals, once conceived of the power of the cause espoused by the advocacy NGO, will be able to affect change, since this is due to their reputation or due to their position. They do not necessarily have to have a large membership behind them. As you will be able to see, the first kind of organization will probably require a broad base and large membership, and a board with roots in many complementary citizens organizations. A second kind of organization may well have a very limited membership, but a very well-developed set of advisors and a very small staff, or perhaps no staff at all. It is useful to kind of understand what type of organization you're dealing with here when you start your advocacy NGO, to think of the kind that you're envisioning effectively, but also to have the foresight not to set the organizational structures in stone. It's quite likely that you will use the terms programs and projects for the activities of your advocacy NGO. This is particularly the case if you're looking for some external funding for your activities. Nearly all founders think in terms of programs and projects, particularly projects. They will probably make sure that you're forced into thinking in the same terms. A program is a linked series of activities that have some common objective to be achieved over time. It is often expressed in general terms and does not presuppose that the organization can control all the components. A project, on the other hand, has a shorter limited activity in terms of time, and it has a very specific objective and a planned and agreed budget which will lead to measurable beneficial impacts. It assumes that the organization can control all the components. Projects are most suitable when we're considering physical infrastructure, and least suitable when we're considering complex change involving human beings. However, we have to get used to it because the unit of development that is used so commonly is the project, and the project mode is unlikely to be replaced by something more suitable. Your advocacy NGO may be thinking of a longer and more general program of altering human behavior, or it may have a specific time-limited objective in mind. I would like to encourage advocacy NGOs to consider the former, but appreciate that the dictates of donors often mean that an NGO will have to negotiate with the latter. It is worthwhile thinking more about the project. A project involves 4 elements: planning, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation. Planning is to make sure that you've thought through all the elements in your project in advance so that the planned activities are likely to be achieved and it's likely to achieve that sort of intended results. The implementation is to allow you to carry out your plans as they were designed. Monitoring is to check that the elements in your project are being carried out as planned, and evaluation is to check that the planned and implemented activities are having the results intended. Project thinking can help you to think clearly and logically, and to make sure that your planned activities are connected to your long-term objectives. This is something that many advocacy NGOs do not get right. It is not unusual for an NGO to get involved in a long list of activities without reflecting whether these activities actually contribute to the mission of the organization. They may just be activities which occupy the NGO without having the hope the impact that they hoped. The NGO have no way of checking that they do not have the intended impact. So, in other words, what I'm suggesting is that a good way to make sure that your activities will support your mission is to deliberately design them that way. It is worthwhile thinking about the risks and benefits that an advocacy NGO faces. First, the risks. NGOs can become the targets of attack by opposing forces. This is something that we generally see amongst most NGOs, and particularly advocacy-oriented NGOs. Second, NGOs need more resources than expected. Negative perceptions also can develop about an NGO's political affiliation or other biases. We can see there might be alienation of some target groups. In the case of a failed strategy, an NGO can also become demoralized. The risk of having an advocacy NGO is tempered by the benefits. Here I've listed a few of the benefits in which we can articulate advocacy NGOs have. First and foremost is the popularity or public recognition of the NGO. Another realm in which we can suggest there are benefits to the advocacy NGO involves policy. That is, there's a policy impact, a very positive one, an achievement of desired policy change, or the ideas by the NGOs put on the policy agenda, which improves the policy environment for the NGO's work. Furthermore, we can suggest that NGOs can belong to a larger group, coalition, or network, which provides an added benefit. Another consideration when it comes to looking at the benefits of an advocacy NGO is that it's had a positive influence with donors or government. This concludes our lecture on advocacy strategies. In our next lecture, we'll turn our attention to fundraising strategies.